Hi guys, it's Sierra from See You Next Tuesday, and today we're sitting down with Brandon Dacosta. He's going to be telling us all about the world of photography and how he got his start in live music photography, and now he owns his own studio that we're shooting in today. So if you've ever been curious about the world of photography, or you're sort of getting your start and want some tips and tricks from someone who's been doing it for a while, then stay tuned and watch the full interview. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in photography?
I've been doing photography and video pretty much my whole life. I grew up like skateboarding, just kind of doing, extreme sports with like friends and stuff. So like BMXing, skateboarding. I would always like bring my parents' camera to kind of film, make just like stupid like stunt videos with my friends.
Some skate clips.
Yeah, some skate clips. I went to Mohawk for engineering. Hated that.
Okay.
And then I got into, I was like, why don't I try doing like photography again, just for like a hobby. I noticed that Mohawk had a photo and film course, and I joined that. At that point, I was going to a lot of concerts and stuff like that, and I was like, why don't I bring my camera to a show and like try photographing that. And I started doing that. I met some people, and fast forward, we're here now.
To now.
I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So that actually kind of goes into like my next question, was that you specialize specifically in like live music photography. Is that something that sort of was just always, I guess, you were already going to concerts, so was that already sort of, I guess, a passion, or how did you narrow down the niche that you wanted to focus on?
I mean, I felt like I was going to a lot of shows, and music's always been something that I've loved. I grew up playing drums. The city that I lived in didn't really have like a music scene, so when I moved out of that city and I went to Hamilton for school, started meeting all these like people who played in bands and went to shows and stuff like that. So meeting them, and then them playing shows, and also like my love of like photography, it kind of like blended together.
One might say you're a groupie.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I would say that's a very
That's
accurate,
how it started.
Yeah, honestly, like just kind of like being there and like being annoying with like my camera.
That's, I think, like how every creative gets into like their craft at the beginning, is like you just start showing up places and you're just like annoying about it.
Yeah, like who's this random guy with a camera? Like he's always here.
Yeah, but then you get free photos.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like how it started. It was very much like, who's this guy? Like he's obviously like new into the scene, whatever. When artists and people started noticing like, oh, like we're actually gonna get something from this guy. Like, I don't know, maybe that sounds a little bad, but.
Well, no, I think at the beginning it's a lot of like people end up doing so much like free work just to build your portfolio. Definitely sometimes people probably take advantage of that a little bit, but I think that like even in terms of getting into like concert photography or like wedding photography, whatever it is, having a few experiences that maybe you're just kind of showing up and taking photos for free, usually I think ends at least you being able to build your portfolio. But sometimes I think people can maybe take a little bit of advantage of that.
And I don't think like doing stuff for free is bad. Like, Lindsay and I have talked about this so many times. You can benefit. Like, I would say maybe, half of the clients that I have now started off of me just like offering stuff, or them maybe coming up to me and being like, hey, we want you to do this, and then maybe just giving them a little bit extra, and then them being like, oh, actually like, that's something that we needed, or that I didn't know that he could do that sort of thing. And a lot of the clients that I started off having, they were like, oh, like Brandon's the photo guy. And they didn't know that I did video. And then once I started being like, hey, like I can actually do video, and here's what I did, they're like, oh, damn, like now we can,
Yeah, I think like as a creative, you always sort of have to like prove yourself a little at the beginning. And also I think it's good for your own self-esteem. At least I find that, sometimes I have to like prove that I can do it to myself.
100%, yeah.
So I think every artist or photographer is a bit different in how they approach their work. So some work on maybe more like specific projects where it's like they'll take photos for a project and then they'll finish it and start onto a next. Whereas others just kind of create more of like an infinite body of work, which is usually more of like a reflection of like the different eras in their lives, which is what you're sort of saying of how you've flowed through from concert photography to weddings now. How would you describe your approach to photography?
How I take things on, or
so is it like, are you kind of just always, I guess, like available to shoot, or are you ever working on like a specific series, if that's like a collection of work, or is it you're kind of just building like a body of work that reflects different eras?
Honestly, like I just kind of like I love like doing photography and video. You know, right now I probably have like maybe a bit under 10 shoots like in my editing queue that are all completely different. Some are like concerts, some are like portraits, some are events, weddings, stuff like that. So I just kind of like do everything all at once. I don't really have like an approach. Like I'm never really like, oh, you know, like this is what I'm focusing on at this point in my life. And it also helps with like not being bored or like burnt out. Like I have a lot of friends who are in the creative space and they're like, man, like it seems like you're always shooting, and it's like I am, but it's like, you know, a couple days ago I was at a hospital shooting portraits, and then like the next day like I was shooting a concert, and then the next day I'm shooting a wedding. So it's like that's why also I love photography, just like it can do like anything.
It's almost like you're like a consultant. Like you always have like different projects, you know? You don't have to get bored working on just like one thing or like doing the same thing every single day.
It's definitely interesting getting a hang of like talking to like all these different people too, because different clients want different things. It's definitely like I am still learning and stuff, but I would say overall I enjoy it.
I mean, it's definitely like a lifelong journey, right? Like but shooting live music, I mean, I have to imagine is pretty exhilarating. I've only done it once or twice, and it felt like I was being thrown into a little bit of a battlefield.
Pretty much,
But so do you go into each concert with an idea or a general vibe, I guess, of what you're trying to capture, or do you sort of just work with what is kind of happening on stage? Like, how does that process work?
I guess it depends on deliverables. If I'm shooting like an EDM show, it's very much like shoot video, raw video, and deliver all raw video. Whereas like maybe a bit more like indie alternative music is more kind of focused on the fan interaction or like behind the scenes and stuff. So I always try to get like my deliverables before I get to the show. But my kind of process with that would be like get the deliverables, post everything on like my, you know, like on your home screen, like the background. And obviously, like I'll glance at that throughout the night, but I don't really have a process. I just kind of do it.
I mean, I guess my next question was like if you could walk us through your creative process. But I guess that's kind of, it's at least for live music, it seems like you kind of just show up and vibe.
It's very, very run and gun, because it also depends on how much the crowd is going to interact and like how the artists are feeling. Because sometimes like, you know, artists can interact with me. And sometimes they just kind of ignore me altogether. And also depends on access too. Like if I have only like in front of the stage access or pit access, right? So the process changes a lot, and it's very, very run and gun. Like honestly, I would say like 90% of the shows I shoot, I just show up and just kind of hope for the best.
I feel like it's nice though to have that fluidity, because I think sometimes artists can get really stuck, like whatever their discipline is, and kind of get stuck in like their ways, and it's a little bit more difficult for them to kind of just take it as it comes. Is there a specific type or like genre of music that you enjoy shooting the most?
I like it all, but I think all genres have their thing. So like with EDM, you know, like I try to focus on like the production, because there's always, you know, like confetti, pyro, stuff like that. And I feel like it's kind of tough to just focus on like the DJ, because he's just like standing there in like one spot. So, you know, just trying to like make like the crowd look big, I guess.
Could you give us some insight on what gear you typically use to shoot live music performances with, and how you chose it and why?
So currently I am shooting on Sony. I started off shooting on Canon. Kind of a story about that. I'll give it really quickly. I was on tour. It was my first tour ever. It was the third last day of a month-long tour. I was stoked. We were in Vegas, and we went out to eat at a Taco Bell specifically.
Taco Bell.
A little bit of PTSD every time I walk into a Taco Bell.
Oh my God.
But we were in Vegas at this Taco Bell, and I got up to go to the bathroom, had my like little camera sling, and got back, and it was gone. Someone had stolen my camera. And I just spent like, you know, the whole summer prior, I was about like 18 at the time, like literally just graduated.
Also cameras are expensive.
It was my first tour out of college too. So after hearing my profs be like, you're not gonna make it, and then that happening, and I'm like, are you serious?
And then having to have like an existential crisis in Taco Bell specifically, in Vegas, which I can imagine is probably like not like chill Taco Bell experience.
No, it was like definitely a weekend. It was super busy, and to be fair, it was my fault. Like I shouldn't have left it there. Yeah, we had like there was like 7 guys, including me, at this table. So like nobody, I don't know how nobody noticed.
Yeah, I was gonna say like that. I was like, I assumed you didn't leave it like at a table by itself.
No, yeah, and typically what I do is I'll like wrap it around like a chair leg or like a table leg, something like that. So it was like definitely like someone saw me, you know, come in and
Got bamboozled.
yeah, it was a rough one, but yeah. So that's what kind of made me switch from Canon to Sony, where I was like, well, don't have a camera now.
Yeah, you're like RIP, guess whatever works.
Yeah. So I'll just buy whatever is at the store, I guess. But honestly, like I love Sony. The low light capability is like insane, especially with video. Now, like it's obviously like shows are super dark, and I'm able to like pretty much shoot in like complete darkness with the Sony. In terms of lenses, I have a lot, but I started off shooting just with like a 24-70 and then like a 35 millimeter. That's pretty much it.
Is there any that you would, I guess, recommend if someone's getting into it, sort of no knowledge, like just want to start shooting, that are maybe on, you know, the more like affordable side? Because typically I think one of the big barriers to getting into like photography in general, it's a bit different now with like iPhones and stuff, but still in terms of like getting professional shots, I think the biggest barrier is like pricing for lenses and cameras and like all the gear and stuff.
It's Sony. It's a Sony mirrorless, the A6000 series. So I wouldn't say like on like the cheaper side, but I would say like it's definitely like save a little bit to get it. I would say maybe like around 1,500.
You can probably buy them used as well.
Yeah, like honestly, like I would say like 90% of my gear when I started was used. Yeah, the Sony A6000 series, like A6300, A6500, A7500, I think there is now. Yeah.
Who are some of your biggest influences and inspirations in photography and videography that you kind of look up to?
Like music-wise, or like music photography, or just like in
just
general?
In general. When you first started getting into it, who were you sort of looking to emulate and were inspired by?
It's weird because I feel like everybody that I know has those, like they have like those set people, but like I never really, like I have influences now for sure, where I look at like, oh damn, like, you know, these people take really good photos or really good videos and stuff like that, and I try to kind of like learn from them a little bit. But when I started, I was just kind of like almost doing my thing. I was more focused on kind of technical stuff than finished product.
Yeah.
I was just kind of like, oh, like this looks cool to me. So like
learning.
This is what I'm gonna do.
There's also that like big I know it's like a story of this photographer professor in a class or whatever, and he gave his students like half the class he told to take one amazing photo for the semester, and that was what they were getting graded on, and then the other half of the class was just to take 100 photos. And it turns out that the people that took 100 photos, all of like the photos towards the end were like much better than the people that had to just take one photo, because they were learning through the process of going out and taking photos and like finding inspiration, whereas the other people were more, you know, reading on theory and like trying to get the perfect shot. Whereas, you know, the people that were just going out and taking photos of everything and like learning ended up having much better shots and like much better understanding at the end of it.
Interesting. So yeah, so they just kind of kept shooting and they were just kind of like
it's all that. Just like trial and error a lot of the times. I think with a lot of disciplines, honestly, in the creatives.
Obviously now like I'm a lot better than I was when I first started.
I would hope. That's kind of the goal, right?
So I mean, I think like, and like kind of going back to what I said before, you know, I kind of like shooting like everything and everything. Because it all kind of translates well with each other. So
and so you also work with businesses, like helping them develop their online brand. Could you talk a little bit about that as well?
I feel like working with businesses and brands was always something that I was kind of scared of doing when I first started, but I enjoy it a lot because it's kind of more creative than I would say like music photography is. Like I feel like sometimes music can be pretty tedious.
You have more control over, I'm assuming, like when you're working with brands, it's like more your creative vision.
Like I love working with a team. I think like I work better when more like creative people are involved.
Collabs.
Yeah, and like with music, it's just kind of like a lot of the artists that I've worked with, they're just like, yeah, like your stuff's cool, like
Take photos.
go ahead.
Yeah.
So working with like brands and businesses, they have kind of like an idea of like what they want to do, and I'm just kind of there to like execute. And like I'm really good with criticism. Like I think that's definitely like a strong suit for me.
I feel like that's an underrated skill that, especially as a creative, you really need to learn to be able to take criticism.
Yeah, I find especially in like the wedding world.
Oh my God, I can imagine.
Yeah, like wedding creatives are just so like stuck in like, this is the best way to do it. There's no other way.
Well, it's like, weddings are like the one day that people are like, this has to be perfect.
Yeah.
Like there's no room for error. Plus everyone's like stressed out.
Yeah, and they make it so much more of like a production than it needs to be, which is like fine, I guess, if that's like your thing. But I don't really do too much of it, honestly. Like, I think it's fun, but I feel like now a lot of companies that are reaching out to me are asking for like iPhone reels and stuff. Like, it's very...
The industry's changing.
Yeah, it's very much like, hey, do you have an iPhone? Can you like edit like these like 5 clips for me? Which is cool, like it's fine, obviously.
It's like your like cousin could probably do this, dude.
But then they get shocked when I tell them like my rates, and they're like, well, but it's just this, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not just your cousin. Like, I've been doing this for a bit, so yeah.
Either like learn how to edit yourself or pay the rate.
Figure it out.
Exactly. So you've actually recently opened your own studio, which is where we're shooting today. And you opened it with 2 different co-owners as well. And how has the experience been so far? And what are you most excited about to utilize the space? And if you want to tell us a little bit about the studio.
Yeah, so the studio name is Akali Studio.
Love that name.
Yeah.
Is there a meaning behind those?
Not referenced to League of Legends character.
No League of Legends characters.
Although I did have my time with League of Legends, but I don't like talking about that.
Who was your main? Who did you main?
I played a lot of like mid lane, so I guess it makes sense with like Akali, but Orianna was definitely...
Yeah, I also had my time in League that I also don't want to discuss.
Definitely lots of angry
There's
moments.
a lot of just like a year of being tilted for constantly.
Lots of broken keyboards, lots of broken furniture.
I also like wasn't good. I actually didn't know there was even like a chat function because the person who introduced me to the game, he turned it off so that I wouldn't. So I didn't know I wasn't good, and people were telling me I wasn't good. But I didn't have the chat, so I didn't know it was. I was just like.
They were telling you, but you didn't see it?
I didn't see it. And then one day I found out there was a chat thing, so I disabled it. I like re-enabled it, whatever. And all of a sudden, everyone is like.
You got your ass handed to you.
And I was like 20. This was like my e-girl phase. This is when I started going to U, and I had bright pink hair, and was trying to make a Twitch moment. Didn't happen, obviously. And I was an RE main though, so. Wasn't good. Was not good. Probably would never play again.
But so apparently Akali means light or brightness in Japanese, and I mean right now it's a bit gloomy, but
it was very bright when we walked in. And there's windows like along everywhere.
Cut to
a shot of the windows.
But so the space is amazing. I feel like it's definitely something that I've always wanted within my like photography video career. It's so weird because none of like my current clients have like a use for the space. So I think it's kind of just like a passion project for me at least. I know Anna and Ashley, the other 2 owners, they, Anna's very much on like the commercial side with big productions and stuff like that. So we built a cyc wall, and we have like different backdrops and stuff, and she has all her lighting. And Ashley does a bit more, weddings and couples and engagement stuff. So that's why we kind of split the space in half. Where we have the one side where it's kind of like a bit more like homey, and then the other side is a bit more of like a production. But honestly, it's been great so far. We've only had the space for 3 months, I think.
Still new, still a baby.
New, so we're still trying to like, get the socials figured out.
Do you think it will kind of open up new verticals for you to want to test out, like maybe like more portrait or?
I think so. Like in school, majority of what we were taught was studio stuff. So like studio lighting, like portraits, stuff like that. I was very, very heavily based on that. And as much as like I didn't care for it at the time, I kind of miss it a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't really do a lot of like passion projects. So what I was hoping to have the space for was to do more passion projects, whether it be like portraits or just kind of like, you know, things like this, or just, you know, we had like a little mini cafe event a couple weeks ago where like different creators came, and it was like a print exchange. So like everybody printed out some photos, and you would meet like another photographer, and you would just swap photos.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was just like on a Sunday morning. The people that ran it brought like their coffee machines, like their big coffee machines in.
Slay.
They printed out like a menu. It was very, very, very cool. Yeah, I was hoping this space would bring more like creatives, like, you know, whether it be like someone that like I've never met before, and or, you know, like my friends shooting here and stuff like that.
I think like the majority, I think, of a lot of like creative pursuits tend to be very solitary at the beginning, at least. And like even if you're shooting at concerts, you're kind of shooting it alone. You're going home, you're editing alone. Like I think it's nice to have a space that even if like you want to edit for the day, you can invite you know, whoever you want over and kind of have a space to get creative. And also so much creativity, I think, just sparks being in a space with someone else, you know? So 100%. I think having it as like a community space and a meeting ground is so awesome, especially in Toronto, where I think a lot of times there's just not enough like spaces or resources for creatives.
Like I said, community for me is huge. When I first started doing like music photography, like I said, I didn't really have anybody who like I kind of like saw as, you know, a mentor, or like, you know, anybody online where I was like, oh, I need to follow exactly what they're doing.
There's not like one size fits all.
Yeah, there's not like a stepping stone into like music photography. So
just kind of start.
You
just show up.
do it. Yeah, you just show up. Like I said, yeah. So for example, like I made like an Instagram chat with like 50 or 60 people, all like local Ontario music photographers, and just like having that space where like, hey, like, is anybody shooting tomorrow? Like, is anybody gonna be here? Hey, does anybody know like what this like press release is about, or something like that, like contracts, or just like just any kind of like help. For me, like I've always loved like
it's like coworkers almost.
And you don't really have that in like, especially like being like self-employed. Like I don't really have that. Obviously, like I can run things by like Lindsay and stuff, but sometimes that's hard.
Sometimes it's just lonely. Like sometimes it's just like I wish I had someone to like stand by the coffee machine with for 5 minutes.
Just be like, hey, like what are you up to?
Tell me about your weekend with your like 3 kids. Like would love to hear about it.
And I mean, like wedding stuff is very much like that. Obviously, you know, you show up to shoot, whether I'm doing like photo or video, and someone's doing the opposite, and you can kind of just, you know, banter with them all day. But then that's it. You go home and then you just stare at a monitor for like 2 weeks while editing. You
have like the worst headaches. You're like sitting in the dark. You're like, okay.
Like when I'm doing like video, I have to edit at like 3 a.m. or else like I can't do it. So I have like the blinds closed, like
your sleep schedule is probably amazing.
I mean, to say the least, it's quite amazing.
Before we finish, is there any, I guess, tips or advice that you'd give to someone who sort of starting out and maybe wants to go down a similar path in terms of live music or setting up their own studio, anything like that?
I would say like, don't be afraid to like reach out to people. I feel like we're in obviously such a digital age, and like Lindsay and I have both experienced this like firsthand, just being like, hey, like you're a cool brand that I like to work with, you're a sick artist that I would love to work with, like let's chat. You know, like offering, you know, even a little bit of free work, or just like reaching out and just like not being like out of sight, and don't be afraid to like reach out to whoever.
I think that's literally the biggest thing, is just start emailing people.
100%.
Like just start asking people. The worst thing they're going to say is no, or they won't reply, which then you don't even get the rejection.
Like this summer I'm doing a lot of festivals, which I'm like super stoked about. And I was thinking like, oh, I would love to do some content related to music photography, and because I feel like there's like no market for that. Like it's so untouched, and there's so many people who are like trying to get into it. It's such like a fascinating thing. Like when I tell people like, oh, like I shoot concerts, they're like, wait, that's a thing?
Like, no, photos just appear of people on stage. No one's actually taking them.
Yeah, they just have, it's all AI.
It's just like, there's just a camera going around in circles.
They're just one big drone. I had reached out to like a couple companies. I reached out to like a memory card company, and I was like, hey, like listen, like I'm a music photographer, I'm shooting these events. There's absolutely no like marketing for music photographers or anything like that. Like, let's do something.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know what, like this actually sounds amazing. Like, we'll send you some stuff. They're sending me like a whole bunch of like SD cards, and we're gonna do some like reels and stuff. But just kind of like having those like
Putting yourself out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think even just across the board, right? Like just get yourself out there. Don't be afraid. Like you need to stand behind your work and believe in what you're doing before other people are going to believe in it, right?
Yeah, and there's always people like you and I on the other side of like brands, like, you know, like your favorite brand, like there's always a social media manager. And like it's their job to literally interact with people. So like whether they see it or don't, like message 10 people and I guarantee you someone's gonna respond.
And like the worst thing people are going to say is no. And then you just keep it moving.
Yeah.
That's the name of the game. Well, thank you so much for taking time to sit with us and chat and learn more about the world of photography. Really appreciate it.